this panel in the usual fashion. Robbie wants to come up and share a few words. We have the wonderful Jean-Pierre with us here today, which is such a treat and an honour. And Robbie would just like to share some words with us all.
Well, thank you, everybody. Yeah, those of us who are mystics and Garthim and Landstriders, we owe the heart of our work, the ambition that we had in our work, all comes from one person, and it's really special for us all that he is here today. Jean-Pierre Amiel, sitting there. Merci, Jean-Pierre. So I want to just remind us all a few words about Jean-Pierre's achievement and his career. Jean-Pierre was born in Morocco, and when he was 17 he went to live in Switzerland and then later moved to France. And there in France he worked with really the greatest of the 20th century mime artists that we have in the European tradition, Etienne Decreux, and also with Marcel Marceau. And he is really the living embodiment of the most exquisite form of pure mime technique. To watch him perform, and after Dark Crystal, I had the honor of performing with Jean-Pierre in his company for 2 years. It was just an extraordinary experience, his technical ability. And he's toured with his company, Théâtre du Corps, in 78 countries. He's won prizes 3 times in Korea and in Edinburgh and in Belgrade. And he's run companies also training people in Africa. But what he brought to Dark Crystal was exactly what you have learned today about Jim, that Jim Henson was someone who really understood art to be about spirituality and to be about the internal development of understanding that could come through art. And I think that's why he chose Jean-Pierre. And Jean-Pierre took us, this circus, ballet, what do we call you, Toby? Juggler. The juggler, the Royal Ballet for Richard, Simon coming from theatre, a mime artist and others. He taught us to go beyond technique. He was the one, when you heard Brian say this earlier, who looked inside us to find a way in which we could make characters have real life, real quality of expression and vivacity inside them that would make them feel real. And he wanted our characters to be able to do anything that a real character, a real mystic or a real Garthim could do. It's such an honor for me, and I think for all of us, that Zay has brought us all together today with you and with Jean-Pierre and his wife Claude and his daughter Elsa. So thank you very much to Zay. Thank you all of you for making this possible.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you. Following on from that then, what were some of the things that Jean-Pierre would kind of take you through to get into that mindset of a mystic? Because obviously you focused on the physical performance a lot, but how did you kind of begin to embody them as a group?
I remember one day we would train on Hampstead Heath, and one day it was all about embodying the elements, so earth, fire, water, etc. So that was a kind of improvisation we did that was not, you'd think, directly related to character, but it had something fundamental underneath it that came through, or there was a desire for it to come through.
Quite a few of you would also kind of dab hand at a lot of the other creatures as well. So I thought it'd be quite appropriate for this panel that we have a fan question from Benjamin. Do we know how Fizzgig was made to roll? Because it's very impressive in the film. Did any of you work on that particularly or around that?
I didn't work on it specifically, but I did see how it was operated. And it was basically pulled on with a piece of string for most of it. It was really very simple. And if you pulled it right, then it would roll. So you'd kind of pull it and it would start rolling. And if you had the right amount of speed on the pull, the people that were doing, I think Dave Golds did it, and different people actually pulled the string on Fizzgig. And sometimes it would just literally be thrown as a ball, and it would roll across, and they would try and aim, so they would do a switch, so they'd have the rolling one. Dave Golds would be ready with the Fizzgig behind a piece of set. It would fly by, someone would catch it, he would pop up, drop down, and then someone would throw another one to exit the screen. So it was, Jim loved those kind of tricks. He loved that really simple but really effective way of mixing and matching puppets in the actual shot and in real time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's in the castle, one of the castle scenes that I'm thinking of, where just the roll is impeccable. It just looks so natural that Fizzgig is alive and he's rolling on his way. We've had the Skeksis Lords up on stage already. From my conversations with all of you this morning, very collaborative atmosphere, very open working space. Was there a bit of shenanigans between Skeksis and Mystics whilst you were kind of on set together? Any kind of pranks or competitions between the two of you, or...?
Well, not really, because we were Skeksis as well. We had to be underneath, pulling, making cheeks puff and do all sorts of things. So
part of the big train.
Yeah, we were involved in all of it, actually, weren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the puppeteers were... I don't know if we actually did... I don't know if you guys remember. Did we actually shoot the Skeksis and the Mystics in the same set, apart from the very end?
Apart from when they come together to become
yeah.
the Earthskeks.
Yes. But that's about it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
At that point, I think the Skeksis were walking Skeksis with little people, weren't they? They weren't
at that
puppets.
point, yes, yeah.
So you've got to understand it's the magic of film. When it's cut together, you don't know that actually in one shot it was a puppet shot, in another shot it's a little person walking in a costume. So when the Mystics, who had to be people inside, meet the Skeksis. The Skeksis are just little people doing the walkabout on a straight floor. You know, it's an illusion. Yeah, I'd hate to tell you that in movies it's a trick.
Yeah, but it's also cutting from a long shot where you two sets of characters to a single closer shot on say a Skeksis, in which case you'd cut from the long shot being a little guy in a costume to a close-up or a medium close of a puppeteered Skeksis.
Yeah.
I remember when I went to see the film when it first came out, and I'd been doing something completely different, so I'd almost forgotten about it. And I was there with my wife at the time, and I said, "That's me," and there was a spider crawling. And I remember do you remember those spiders? And then I was a spiny creature, a sort of foam thing. Yeah. I had to roll down a slope, and it was really painful. I remember that.
Were they the pink spiny
creatures
that Jenny
I was in that.
When he's up on Aldridge Mountain. Yeah, and I think you were quite involved in the creation of lots of things, Dave, especially with the Earthskeks as well. I saw a good photo of you operating one earlier.
Yes, yes.
How did you kind of go about creating that? And it's got very delicate movements, I think. How did you go about operating that?
Yes, well, I mean, the Earthskeks was originally, like everything, designed by Brian, and Lyle Conway did a small maquette, and then it was my job to sculpt it full size. Jim wanted them 11 foot tall. He wanted them actual size. Because I said, well, why don't we do them like small tabletop? We're against black. We can be any scale. And Jim said no. He wanted to have the sense of the weight, the size, and everything. So they were mounted on very big steel subframes. And then we actually operated the arms from the elbow, which is a typical puppet way of controlling arms. And we then all covered in black so that we would disappear. And so Dave Golds did the one arm, I did the other arm, and it was it had nice, subtle finger movement. It was quite a complex mechanism that I'd designed and built. Which is the reason why I ended up doing the right arm, I think, because I had most experience rehearsing it while I was building it. So, because we were getting to a time at the end of the shoot when there wasn't much time for rehearsing. All of that initial work had been done on Mystics for that 6 months before, but right at the end we had to wrap up the film. So, but Jim very carefully choreographed every move. With Dave Golds and I, we worked out finger moves and different things that meant specific ideas to the Earthskeks, and so we rehearsed that and tried to do that on every take.
That's interesting. So not just general movements; they were kind of creating symbols that.
Yes. Yeah, very specific and very specific timing on specific words. So.
I remember one day being taken up into one of the sound stages right in the top, and we had these sort of whirligig things which we had to stand right at the top and just drop them down, and they span down. And when I saw the film, it was all run in reverse, so it was a reverse camera, so these things went up.
Toby, you were going to add there?
I was just saying we were drawn in. You've got to understand, we were hired to do the big creatures. We were then each assigned to one of the chief Muppet people. So Robbie and I worked on Jim's team, doing the other hand or the eyes or whatever. But all these background environmental creatures and plants, we all had a hand in. That particular one, when I came in one day, they wanted it like a dandelion flying in the wind. They were up in the ceiling trying to pull it up on a string. Well, of course, it went up going boing. So they decided to shoot it in reverse. And we were all up in the thing by the afternoon playing darts. We each had 2. And you had to drop them and spin them and try and stick them in. Well, it was second unit. We spent the whole afternoon doing that, because if one of them didn't stick in, then in reverse, of course, it was all wrong. That shot that's in the movie, it's a split second, but we all cheered on the day when it happened. Yes! It was just insane.
Good for a day's work.
Every detail in that film is incredible. Yeah. Every film.
I'm just thinking to some of the things that Amiel, that I remember being taught. He gave us these wonderful exercises for our eyes and turning our head and this, that and the other. And I thought, why are we doing this? What's this got to do with what we're supposed to be doing? But of course, within the heads of the mystics, we had somehow to move the eyes. Do you remember? That was really very tricky to get. And we had monitors underneath us so they could see exactly where we were looking.
I didn't get a monitor.
Didn't you have one of those? I did.
I was working blind.
I was blind in it too, yes.
With the big scene, one of the major scenes is where they're taking on the Garthim. Garthim, their costumes obviously having a lot of weight to them, you being up on those stilts. Kind of talk us through what was going through your mind as you were trying to carry out that scene.
Well, fortunately, we had a safety harness, and without that, we certainly couldn't have functioned, because it was just absolutely too dangerous. If you went, it was 3 meters up, you would just nosedive. Once or twice we experienced that, we would stumble. And Bob Harmon, who did all the Superman flying work, he was the guy, and saved us from serious injury. But yeah, it's amazing how we rehearsed months on these things. Every morning, get up on the stilts, just run around, jump, turn, pirouette, everything you could do. And because I found that if they took 60% of my body weight, I could actually gallop. Because physically that would be impossible without taking that much of your weight off you. And I found that's how we galloped. And we had literally a building site crane, like that, huge crane, with a big reel, like a fishing reel, which would move along with us, and then counterbalanced all the time. So we always knew we were in good hands, and then because you had to be a bit fearless and just go for it.
Yeah.
But we knew we had that backup, and that gave us a lot of confidence.
Good. Yeah, safety first.
The mystics, about the danger, and you said the safety first and everything. We would rehearse without the heads on, and just sort of, and then we'd go for a take, and we'd get all dressed up. So then they said, right, heads on, and the eyes on the Landstrider were radio controlled, and there was a battery inside here, and then a connector. So there was 2 people, one was holding the head, the other connected it up. He's just putting the head on me, and smoke starts to come from inside the costume. And this is a foam injection latex suit, which took 3 hours to get into. And if that had ignited, I would not be sitting here now. Definitely, I would have been barbecued, and I would not have survived it, because they would never have been able to get me out. So that was very scary, and the wires had short-circuited, and they just dived in, grabbed everything, and pulled it out. But yeah, that was the most frightening experience.
Any other close calls for the rest of you, or?
I remember we had these undergarments for the mystics. They were sort of, do you remember, black sort of, and one day they really were very, very itchy. I remember, I thought, how much longer have I got to stay in here? wanted to scratch myself, but I couldn't.
We had 4 hands. You could have used one of them.
Do you know, I can't remember. How did we operate the arms and hands? I don't remember doing
Well, the 2 are sort of suspended, and one we use very often as a walking stick.
Oh, that's...
Remember?
Yeah, I remember now.
Because you were using one of them to operate the neck and the head.
That was attached to the foot, so wherever the foot went, the hand went. Yeah. So it was one of the tricks.
All I can remember is it was absolutely back-breaking and boiling hot, wasn't it, all the time? It really was.
I remember, I think Jim himself said that he tried to kind of hold the pose for a very short while and instantly had to kind of stand up. He didn't know how you guys were able to do it.
We had these little stools that we sat on, and just as the take was about to go, somebody would come in and take away the stools.
And I was talking to Toby earlier, actually. He's got some great photos on his desk of just casually reading a book in one costume or just kind of looking in the distance in a Gartham costume.
On the set, we couldn't get out the costumes very quickly. Now they have to stop and do lighting and stuff like that. But they tried to put you at ease because when it comes to the performance, it's important that you have your energy levels up. Imagine with these kind of puppets, all the blood goes out of your arm. By the time you're ready, your arm is dead. Well, with these big creatures, it was more or less the same. I mean, I can do this without my heels coming off, but all the blood gets cut off. And they put a little box in just to let the blood back into your legs, With the Gartham, they used to hang us up in a wooden frame because it was so heavy, we couldn't take it off. They would just literally hang us up and just take the weight off. And it must have looked mad. If you'd come on the set, you'd have gone, what are they doing?
Yeah. They've got to look after you guys. Dave, I wanted to bring maybe a slightly touchy subject up because you operated the Erskex. And one thing that always amazes me at the end of the film is that they never actually give an apology for decimating the Gelfling and destroying Thra. We have our 2 Gelflings in today. I don't know whether you had any few words of apology perhaps you could, on the Erskine behalf, in terms of maybe just a heartfelt for Lisa and Stephen.
Yes, well, I think finally the Erskex were very happy to be one being again. And a bit like human beings who have possibly 2 different sides, the perfect side and the maybe not quite so perfect side, the constant battle. I think trying to split them out, as happened, was not necessarily a good thing. So I think they were just really delighted to be back into their original selves and hoping to put extra life back into the world, which is what they started to do.
Yeah, it does. You see the landscape regenerate and the crystal is pure and the castle is pure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think probably it was a good thing that they got back together.
With the Mystics, like we've mentioned on these panels already, there's so much relevance that stays within Dark Crystal. Age of Resistance renewing that again. What kind of teachings do you think we can take away from the Mystics? And kind of maybe what did you realise about yourselves, perhaps from Jim's points of view?
I was the healer. And it was several years later that I suddenly realised, having played that role, that it had an extraordinary effect on me personally, and I wanted to go into finding about how to heal people. And today I work in the care industry, and I can trace it right back to that, I think. So that is quite profound, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. How about the rest of you? Any epiphanies?
There is also the thing that you can be cast against type and then you have to perform, you have to invent something. But to a great extent, when you're wearing costumes, it helps if your temperament matches it. Now, by nature, I felt like a mystic. I felt perfectly happy. It was like a yoga thing. I would get down there. You were uncomfortable. You're waiting to do the shot. But I would go off into kind of a trance state. Because of the pain and because of the discomfort, you just had to go into kind of a passive state. Now, I wasn't a natural Garthim. I mean, Garthim, we had a Turkish guy called Hus that was he loved being a Garthim. It was like, he was really dynamic and fierce and strong. He's the guy that smashes down the pod people's wall. That was his my natural temperament was to be a mystic. I enjoyed being a mystic because of the strange state of mind. which, as I say, it was like a yoga, wasn't it? I mean, it was a very, very difficult thing to do.
Very spiritual experience.
It was, yeah.
Well, it's meditative as well, because they move so slowly, and all your concentration, all your acting, that the head is here. You're kind of moving your head, the real head, to the head that you're portraying. It's an internal process, and because it's slow, it matches their metabolism. But yeah, I also really liked the Garthim very much, because it was you were able to be more free. Because as a mystic, you have to move slowly, even though your muscles might be screaming at you. You're performing this bit here, and it's got to move really slowly. Because inside you're going, ah! So if you're in a Garthim, you can really let rip. So it's a totally different kind of experience. But great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, completely destructive, like you say, tearing down August Observatory to pieces. So what are kind of some of your maybe some more personal kind of fond memories of just working together? Just kind of you've had the chance to meet at this event and kind of reminisce.
When I was driving up in the car, I was starting to think about the whole process of it. I joined 3 weeks late because I was performing in New York. I couldn't start with everybody else, so I came in a bit later, and I was sort of absolutely shocked by the fact that we had to do cross-country runs and swimming and goodness, only weightlifting. Do you remember all those things we had to do at the beginning? And I thought, I'm not sure I want to do this when I started it.
For me, one of the magic things was that as well as doing this stuff, which was to me a new adventure, because I got chosen to be on Jim Henson's team, I'm working on Jen and the Ritual Master and so on, but it means I was really close to Jim. If you imagine he's doing the head of the Ritual Master here, his left hand is doing the left hand, I'm stuck in his armpit doing the right hand. Okay? Now he's directing the movie. All the other Skeksis are rehearsing and practicing. Jim is directing the movie, and I'm just there, and then he would just turn to me and go, okay, that's what we're going to do. There was no practice. It was a go-for-it moment. But I was that close to him. One day, Frank Oz came over to me and said, it's boring, isn't it? And I said, what? And he said, just being one hand of a creature. And I went, no, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. He said, don't kid me. He said, I was in Jim's armpit for 2 years before they gave me my own puppet. And I started imagining, 2 years from now, I'll be Fozzie Bear.
I was just thinking with Jim, he had a vision for the whole thing. And I remember one day we were doing the pod people inside the pod village. And I suddenly felt very creative myself, and I wanted my particular pod person to react a bit more than to what he wanted. And no, he said, you can't do it like that, it's got to be like this. So every single detail was directed to perfection by him.
It's nice to see that we have Age of Resistance and the puppetry as an art is still very much alive. What do you think keeps people away, perhaps, that there are many of us here that absolutely love this franchise and love the art, but it still at times kind of doesn't gain that friction, that kind of mass appeal? How do you think we can kind of break that?
I think people are now very much involved with technology, and that follows through into film, and we are dealing here with real people. I know they're puppets, but they're actually being operated by real people. I think somehow we need to return to that much more organic way of doing things. That's my personal feeling.
Anyone else like to chime in on that?
Well, yeah, my dad was a puppeteer, but just a classic one man in a booth, and all the characters coming and going were done by one person. He was doing all the voices and everything else. But I realised as a child how magic puppets are. You've got to bear in mind, Dark Crystal is trying to be realistic. I mean, the creatures blink and breathe and all that. But actually, Kermit the Frog, a green sock with half a ping pong ball for eyes, is alive. I don't know anybody who goes, it's a puppet. I mean, Fozzie Bear, Miss Piggy, they are living creatures, and that's really magic, and that's what puppetry is. That's why the practical effects. It's very different from CGI, which is a kind of cartoony. It's another art form, but it's a different one, and there's something about the practical effects of puppets, which is magic. That's all. It's magic. I can't put my finger on it, you know. But it was fantastic to be involved with the Grand Masters. I mean, Jim and Frank were the best on the planet, so we got taught to do it by the best.
Simon, you...
Well, I was just going to say, so much of puppeteering is about the eyes. So, you know, where the eyes are, you're just controlling the eyes with your hand, effectively. Whereas a lot of the CGI stuff, they still haven't always got an eye or eye movement that's convincing. I think that's in technology, they call it the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
About, you know, and you see certain CGI characters and they're a bit... they're looking in the right direction, but they're not, it's not, and somehow doing that with your hand, you know, it's more effective somehow. It's slightly weird.
I would agree, yes, because when you're looking around with your hands, it's not really the way a human being would look, so it's very much an interpretation of real life. And I think with the fact that you've got this interpretation and a skill and a style within the puppetry gives you a sense of a soul. I think it's very much harder to get a real sense of soul in animation. It happens with the CG characters when it's in like fantastical characters. It can be done, but it's a lot harder. It's almost, if you've got a really good puppeteer, their soul emits through the puppet. I mean, with Kermit, you never question Kermit. You're absolutely certain he's there. Yeah. There's no question, and it's just a piece of green cloth, effectively. But it's the soul of the puppeteer reaching through the art that I think connects with the audience, and so hopefully it will continue to do so for many more years.
Yeah, I mean, digital, the way in which CGI is constructed, it is very detached. It's someone at the computer that's doing it in increments, and like you say, it's that physical connection. You can absolutely see why there is a vast difference. What would be your advice to anyone that wants to kind of come into this field of art, into puppetry now, kind of from your own experiences and kind of maybe even what you see on the current landscape? What would your advice be?
I don't know. Maybe people have to keep on expressing their appreciation of what I call old-fashioned puppetry techniques versus the automatic use of CGI, and if it's appreciated enough, it will continue to be done, because you know what the Netflix series does is it combines the old style puppetry with the newer technology instead of going straight as a default to technology, CGI stuff that is created after the event. So I think you've just got to show your appreciation of it so that it continues. Yeah. Because it's all fed by the feedback of you, the audience.
Absolutely. With events like this, audience, massive round of applause, please. Thank you for Toby Philpott, J Williamson, Richard Slaughter, Dave Barclay and Hugh Spight.